what's Keir Starmer going to do? It sounds like these are just quite small first steps. Are you going to waste the opportunity?
Well, firstly, I'm not going to get ahead of myself and predict what's actually going to happen in the general election, because every vote does have to be...
Starmer found himself in a real crisis, and everything went awry. In a recent interview, the journalist mercilessly criticized him, accusing him of incompetence. This interview was a wake-up call foreshadowing how the Labour Party could ruin our future. Starmer made many serious mistakes and in a surprisingly short time managed to turn society against himself. We're starting.
I guess this is because, to take the NHS for an example, you say the NHS isn't on its knees but on its face, but what you're proposing is just a 1.1% increase in spending, and it's not just the NHS. Climate, for example, would be another example. You say you want a zero carbon electricity system by 2030, but you're now saying you're going to spend 6 times less than you did in 21 making that happen. It feels pretty timid, I've got to say.
Well, the first thing is that if you're on a waiting list and you need your hip replaced or your knee replaced or whatever it may be, saying you're going to get your operation isn't timid, it's vital.
I'm saying that 1.1% increase in spending is timid.
So this is change worth having. The bigger change for the NHS on AI, on tech, is really important part of the future of the NHS.
Starmer shocked everyone by reneging on his high-profile promise to allocate £140 billion to create a carbon-neutral electricity supply system. He initially announced in 2021 that he would invest £28 billion a year until 2030, and this promise looked promising. But now Rachel Reeves has unexpectedly announced that this amount will only be a guideline in the second half of the first Parliament's term. Starmer also refused to reconfirm the allocation of funds, which, according to Labour's initial calculations, were vital. I sincerely doubt that he will be able to fulfil his obligations by 2030 if he does not invest £28 billion a year, because this figure was based on their own calculations.
The first steps are going to be putting in place the plans for 40,000 extra appointments in the NHS to get the waiting list down each and every week. That's 2 million a year. Making sure that we start the recruitment of the teachers we need in our secondary schools, so all children have the opportunities that they need to go as far as their talents will take them, not be inhibited by the income or salary of their parents. Making sure that we're setting up Great British Energy so that we can deal with energy, renewables, and keep the energy costs down. Here in Stoke, the single thing every business has said to me is our energy bills are too high. These are some of the things that we can begin to do, the first steps, the down payment on the bigger change we need across the country.
The UK recently shut down its last coal-fired power plant, and although catastrophic power outages were predicted, this did not happen, but alas, the reduction in electricity prices did not take place. How is it? Coal is considered a relatively cheap source of energy, but new and more environmentally friendly alternatives such as wind and solar should be even cheaper, right? In fact, the whole problem lies in the absurd system that governs the energy market. This market lives by its own rules, completely ignoring competition and sources of energy production. Moreover, the UK suffers from dependence on natural gas, which puts us in an extremely vulnerable position. Despite the fact that cheaper and cleaner energy production should have led to lower bills, the reality is completely different. The final price we pay to energy producers is determined by the most expensive unit of energy produced at the moment. This was designed to encourage producers to generate electricity with minimal cost and maximum profit. But as a result, because we are so dependent on gas and its price is much higher than that of other sources, the real cost of electricity is almost always set by the most expensive gas-fired power plant in the country. Thus, even if some of the energy comes from solar plants and is very cheap, it will be paid for at the price as if it were the most expensive gas station. This is complete madness, which completely negates the savings from using solar or wind energy.
And if I'm honest with you, I'm a bit confused by some of the arguments against this, right? Saying that private schools will close, for example, if it's introduced. Why wouldn't private schools just increase class sizes or cut staff and make, I guess, the kind of economic decisions that the state sector has to make all the time? Do you think that actually, private schools should have to make the kind of, cut their cloth in the same way that all the other schools do?
Yes, I think they will adapt, and they've had lots of increases in costs over the last 10, 14 years. And they've accommodated it, and there's no evidence to show that these schools will close. They don't have to pass the cost on to parents.
The Labour Party is going to introduce a shocking 20% VAT on tuition fees in private schools. This decision is likely to impose additional financial burdens on parents, which will lead to a huge increase in the cost of education. The already not small amounts that families spend on private education already eat up a huge part of their budget. Labour claims that the introduction of VAT on private schools will allow the state to raise about £1.6 billion a year. The money will allegedly be used to create about 6,500 jobs for teachers in public schools in England. But where is the concern for private schools and the interests of parents? And that's not all. Schools may have to cut scholarships and discounts, which will be a real disaster for many families. For them, the costs may increase not by 20%, but by a much more frightening amount. This decision can be a real blow to parents who just want to give their children the best education.
You said you were going to.
This is a big moment for our country.
You said you were going to spend £28 billion on that, and now you've reduced it to £4.7 billion a year, 6 times less. It feels like you've started radical and you've become more and more timid.
No, the objective has always been clean power by 2030. And I've not moved that.
If you don't get it, well, you've failed.
I have checked that every single thing we need to get to 2030 is in place, fully costed and fully funded. We do need investors to come up alongside us on this project. We've been talking to them now for the best part of 2 years about the conditions they need to come up and partner with us on this. And most of them say it's going to be difficult, but it's...
Starmer believes that voters will accept his arguments about the need for higher taxes and a reasonable increase in government spending. He urges all of us to face the harsh reality of fiscal policy and resist the temptation of easy answers to difficult problems. Labour was not completely honest with voters during the election, which causes discontent and disappointment. The budget will inevitably have to take into account tax increases, even despite Labour's promises not to increase the tax burden on working citizens. He argues that borrowing should be a driving force for long-term economic growth.
It is about, as you rightly say, our policies, our ambition. It is also about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make your decisions. And I have in my mind's eye all the people that want to get on for themselves, their families, their communities, and ultimately their country, because I think that's the vast majority of people in this country who are reasonably minded, pretty tolerant, want to pull the country together and move it forward.
We are out of time, but just finally, what's more likely, you winning the election or England winning the Euros?
Well, I can't have both, I don't suppose.
No, absolutely not.
The more important one is winning the election, but don't let that be any sort of reflection on... I say get behind the team when it comes to England.
Starmer promises change, but doesn't seem to care about people's fates at all. From the elderly to the young, from representatives of heavy industry to small business owners, this administration is fueling conflict in every corner of the UK, indiscriminately attacking everyone it sees fit. They undermine even the little trust that has been slowly restored. There is growing anxiety and confusion among the people caused by the incessant flow of meaningless statements. They constantly refer to the financial hole left by the previous government, but this government is well aware of the financial problems the country is facing. Instead of establishing dialogue and finding solutions, they are happy to wage war against innocent civilians. From the very beginning of its rule, this government sought to start a conflict with those who did not want to follow their socialist agenda, showing complete disregard for the real troubles and disappointments of millions of people. Instead of listening to the people and dispelling their fears, Starmer chose the path of repression, using the police to harass people. While the prison system in the UK is already on the verge of collapse, the government has found additional places in prisons for these people. Pensioners, many of whom depend on additional financial assistance during the harsh winter months, are threatened with the cancellation of this assistance in order to receive an additional £2 billion. These people have been contributing to the economy for decades, paying taxes and supporting the country. At the same time, Starmer promised to continue to allocate £3 billion a year to Ukraine to finance a war that has nothing to do with our country, showing his true face in the most outspoken way. What do you think about this video? Write your opinion in the comments. See you in next video.